Food businesses that are a part of the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment are committed to reducing their food waste during production and getting as much food into customers' hands as possible. Cutting down food waste throughout operations helps get more people fed, conserves natural resources, and saves money. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment is a public-private partnership that brings together food companies, nonprofits, and governments to cut down on food waste along the west coast of the United States. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment brought these organizations together to help halve food waste in the region by 2030. Today, you'll learn more about food waste, what it is, how it impacts people and our planet, and ways we can prevent and reduce it in your business and beyond. Here's the good news. There's enough food produced in the world to feed everyone. But now the not so good news. Food waste is a huge problem globally. Nearly 40% of all food produced each year is lost or spoiled before it's able to be consumed. That's the equivalent of 1.3 billion tons of food lost per year, or $1 trillion thrown away. In developed countries like the US and Germany, 40% of food waste occurs at retail, where food can be thrown out due to appearance or overstock, or at the consumer level, when people overbuy or when leftovers go into trash bins. But there are opportunities to eliminate food waste in manufacturing as well, by reducing spillage and spoilage. At the farm level, nearly 15% of all food grown is lost, and in lower-income countries like Vietnam and Mexico, up to 40% of food waste happens during the first stages of food production. Farmers often lack the resources to complete a thorough harvest, which translates to perfectly good food rotting in the ground. So too, farmers often have poor storage facilities, which leads to pest infestations and crops ruined from mold. Solving the 1.3 billion tons of food wasted globally could end world hunger and feed up to 3 billion people each year, more than double the amount of people that go malnourished today. Reducing food waste is a critical component to ending global hunger, fighting climate change, and fostering productive food systems. Some 800 million people worldwide, or 1 in every 9 people, lack consistent access to enough food. This persistent lack of food is called food insecurity. In the US, the level of food insecurity for individuals has grown significantly since the onset of the pandemic. Pre-2020, 35 million people across the US were food insecure. That number is expected to jump nearly 45% to 50 million people by the end of 2022. Being conscientious about our food consumption and donating what we can't consume can make a large impact in supporting our community's hunger crisis. Cutting global food waste in half by 2030 is a key goal of the United Nations. The UN laid out a plan in the fall of 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short, that was adopted by global governments and businesses alike. The SDGs are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The United Nations plans to achieve these goals by 2030. The UN's food waste goal is incorporated into its number 12 SDG, Responsible Consumption and Production. Specifically, the subgoal 12.3 states that by 2030, global food waste should be cut in half by combating waste at various points within the food system, at the retail and consumer levels, along production and supply chains, and at crop harvesting time. When food goes uneaten, the resources used to produce this food are wasted as well. Our food system requires the use of our limited natural resources, which we currently struggle to manage sustainably. When 40% of food is lost or wasted, the resources that were used to produce the food include fresh water and expansive amounts of land to grow the crops, as well as the energy, labor, and financial resources to harvest, process, and transport the food. Our global food production system consumes 72% of all the planet's fresh water supply, 30% of global energy use, and 50% of all land available to grow food. These numbers fail to account for other resources that are destroyed in the name of food production, namely the loss of forest and grassland areas as natural ecosystems to sequester carbon, and as a habitat space for a wide range of species. In the U.S., 140 million acres of cropland and 5 trillion gallons of water are used on wasted crops each year. In the United States, nearly 40% of food goes unsold or uneaten. That's the equivalent to 400 pounds of food wasted annually by every American, or about 33 pounds of food thrown away every month. Or think of wasted food in the U.S. as 90 billion meals worth of food that's unsold or uneaten each year. If all of the food waste in the United States was grown in one place, say on a mega farm, it would cover roughly 80 million acres, or over 3/4 of the state of California. Growing the food on this farm would consume all the water used in California and Idaho combined. This mega farm would harvest enough food to fill a 40-ton tractor every 20 seconds. Many of those trailers would travel thousands of miles, moving food to be kept cold in refrigerators and grocery stores for weeks. But instead of being purchased, prepared, and eaten by people, this perfectly good food would be put back onto a truck to be hauled and dumped into a landfill. Food waste is a key driver of the global climate crisis. Whether we like it or not, most food waste goes into the landfill. The food rotting in those landfills emits powerful greenhouse gases, known as GHGs, mainly composed of methane and carbon dioxide. In fact, some 3 billion tons of greenhouse gases are emitted into the atmosphere from wasted landfilled food each year. Methane is particularly worrisome as it is 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide, which means it heats up the Earth's atmosphere much quicker. Preventing as much landfill greenhouse gases as possible through the reduction of food waste is a top climate priority by leading organizations worldwide. In the U.S., the production of lost or wasted food generates the equivalent of 33 million cars worth of carbon emissions. The average U.S. household wastes a third of its food. From a cost perspective, $240 billion are lost annually to food that's grown, processed, transported, and then trashed. That's the equivalent to about $2,000 worth of food thrown away per household. Think of that $2,000 this way. It's 727 Starbucks coffees you didn't drink, a family vacation for 4 that you didn't take, and 8 years worth of Netflix you didn't watch. If you look at the Pacific Coast region specifically, more than $65 billion worth of food is wasted, a cost shared by businesses and consumers alike. The terms wasted food or food waste describe food that's not used for its intended purpose and is instead diverted and or managed in other ways. Let's talk about the various ways in which food waste can be repurposed. We'll start with the most preferred and end with the least. The best means of eliminating food waste is to prevent it from happening in the first place. The second is to reduce food waste by donating it to feed people and communities. The third is to recycle food waste to be used as feed for animal stock. The fourth way is to recover wasted food through composting, which enables food scraps to be returned back to the earth to create new healthy soils. And lastly, there's disposal, which is the least preferred method for managing food waste. Wasted food can be mixed with other trash streams and sent to landfills, which are large emitters of greenhouse gases and unnecessary contributors to climate change. We're now going to take a look at how and where food is wasted in the global food supply chain. At farms, low market prices and high harvest costs make it unprofitable for farmers to gather all that they produce. This is especially true in developing countries where financial resources are limited and labor is scarce. In the US, industrial agricultural practices are highly inefficient, leaving vast quantities of food unharvested or left in the fields to be tilled under. Retailers also impose strict cosmetic standards for the produce that they are willing to accept from farmers, which can exclude imperfect-looking or oddly shaped produce. On the way to retailers, food waste occurs because of improper storage methods all along the supply chain, from suppliers to manufacturing to stores and restaurants. At food manufacturers, around a third of food waste at the manufacturing level in the US is captured and repurposed as animal feed. When we take that recovered food waste out of the equation, there's still about 2 billion pounds of food wasted in this stage. A number of issues like overproduction, product damage, and technical problems at facilities contribute to this large quantity of manufacturing food waste. At stores, grocers may face challenges around inventory management. Retailers may dispose of safe, edible food that has small blemishes or doesn't meet certain color or size criteria in order to meet consumers' perceived sense of quality. And 50% of food waste at the retail level is due to overcautious practices around date label concerns. Within restaurants, between consistently making bulk purchases, changing demands from customers, and very high freshness and quality standards, restaurants struggle to manage and make full use of the food that enters the kitchen. But the largest amount of waste occurs after the food is served. 70% of food waste at the food service level comes from plate waste. Plate waste happens when customers don't eat all the food they were served or that they place on their plates at buffets. And lastly, consumers have the opportunity to reduce waste at home through meal planning, buying the correct portions, and using good storage techniques. So too, better understanding food date labels can help prevent people from throwing away perfectly good food. Notably, many households across the US currently have limited access to composting programs, which in the future could have the potential to eliminate up to 30% of food waste at the residential level. The main takeaway from walking through the food value chain is that waste occurs at every point in the system. Armed with that knowledge, you have the opportunity to start paying attention to where food is lost currently at your workplace and to suggest ways food waste can be avoided, diverted, and/or recovered. Your role is critical to feeding people and communities all around the world. When less food is wasted and more is captured for human consumption, fewer people go hungry and unnecessary greenhouse gas emissions are avoided, which helps reduce the effects of climate change globally. At your place of work, consider doing the following. 1. Flag consistently occurring food waste issues and raise them to your team or supervisor so someone can check out whether a specific aspect may need fine-tuning or would benefit from a process change that requires minimal effort. Your sharp eyes and knowledge of a particular process can identify food waste reduction opportunities that are meaningful and replicable across additional areas of a facility. It's always worth considering how seemingly small standard operating procedures can be improved upon. 2. Consider how food that may not be fit to sell at retail, but is perfectly edible, can be repurposed so that it's diverted from the landfill. For example, a food donation area can be created in your company's facility that stores packaged food that didn't fill full caseloads of shippable product, or where quality control flagged defects in the final product packaging. These foods can be donated to your local charities. Know of a good food bank or soup kitchen you can recommend to your workplace? Make the connection. Know you are a critical component to implementing food waste solutions in every aspect of your life. Actions you take make a difference. Here are a few ideas you can implement at home and with your family to stop food waste. When purchasing, have a plan when you go to the store so you only buy what you need and what you will use. Remember, 35% of wasted food is fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, so be especially mindful when buying these items. For storing food, proper storage of food will make it last longer. Learn how and where to store your food to keep it fresh longer. Remember that if you can't see your food, it's more likely to spoil before it's eaten. So avoid overstuffing your refrigerator, label items in containers, and rotate your groceries so items that will expire first are in the front. Freeze items such as fresh herbs or bread before they go bad to use them later when you have a need for them. Get creative and play top chef at home. Make meals out of what you already have before heading to the store. Think about stir fries and soups for vegetables, smoothies for fruit. For an extra challenge, repurpose your scraps. For example, boil extra vegetable scraps and meat trimmings to make your own homemade broth. Be aware of best buy dates. More than 80% of Americans discard perfectly good food because they misunderstand date labels. Date labels on food are not standardized and often misleading. A best buy date is different from a consume by date and indicates the quality or taste of the food will start to diminish after a certain date, but does not necessarily imply that it is not safe to eat. Embrace food composting. Composting your food scraps at home is one of the best ways to reduce your household waste. On average, 25% of household trash is food waste. If your trash carrier provides compost disposal, food waste can simply be dumped into its own separate bin and taken out with the trash. If this is not an option where you live, consider food composting on your own property to create a rich soil for your garden and houseplants. Thank you for taking the time to learn about food waste and the ways in which you can work toward reducing wasted food where you work and live, in your local community, and across the globe. We invite you to explore the reference sources that are included on the next slide below. Remember, support your organization's food waste reduction efforts, and more personally, enjoy your own food waste reduction journey.